God lives on the inside of us. He knows exactly what's wrong, and when we give Him permission to fix us, when we understand that something's broken and we give Him permission to fix something, He does.
Nobody wants to be defined by what's happened to them in their past that was not good.
That's right.
I didn't want to be defined by, how I thought people felt about me or how I felt about myself. I hated that. I was miserable because you are captive to whatever it is that's, making you unhealthy from your past. And once you're free, it's like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest blessing.
Now, we have an app that we just came out with called 21-Day Inner Healing Journey. Now, you do it on your phone, you can do it on your tablet, you can do it on your computer. It's over 2 hours of video content by me, and it's 21 days of walking you through the process of inner healing. Now, this teaching, I hope ministers to everyone, but for some of you, you might need more. You just might need extra time and extra information and ministry to deal with some issues in your life. But I want to talk about emotional healing in this. Now, your marriage cannot grow beyond your level of emotional health. And so this is a critical issue. And Karen and I, when we got married, we were the walking wounded. We both came out of both very dysfunctional homes, and we were devastated. And I don't use that word loosely. My mom and dad, my mother, my father grew up in abject poverty. My father slept outside every night. His father was a sharecropper. He ate meat once a week. That's all they could afford. He grew up in the Depression and during World War II. He didn't wear shoes. He didn't know they were poor because they lived in the country. He didn't have anything to compare it to. But my father was deeply, deeply damaged, scarred from poverty that affected our family in a dramatic way. My father had nothing to do with us as a family. He was a good provider, and he was a good provider because he didn't want us to live in poverty the way that he did. But he had absolutely nothing to do with us, never came to a game, never talked to us. If I walked up to my dad and said, "Daddy, what's 2 + 2?" he would say, "I don't know." He had absolutely nothing to do with the family. Now, I led my dad to the Lord 20 years before he died, and he was the most precious person in the world, saved. But growing up, he was devastated. My mother, very beautiful. My mother was a model when I was growing up. Very beautiful, homecoming queen, cheerleader in high school. But my grandfather was the town drunk, and I loved him. My grandfather, when he was sober, was a really sweet man. When he was drunk, he was the meanest guy in the world. And my granddad would get drunk and find my mother out with her friends and shame her publicly. And this is what he would do. And she would be out having a good time, or she would be out, doing something, and he would just do everything he could to make her life miserable. And that's one of the kinder things that he did. And it deeply, deeply scarred my mother. And so my mother and father were both damaged, and I grew up in that. And came out of that with all of my own issues. My mother and I was with my mother this week, and we were talking about it. Karen's mother, remarkable woman, is a double amputee. She lost her arm and a leg in a hay baling accident when she was a girl growing up. And her parents didn't come to the hospital for a week. And when they came to the hospital, they said, "No one help her." And when they took her home, they told the other children, "No one help her." And Karen's mother's a beautiful woman, and she's never felt sorry for herself a day in her life, and she is just an absolutely remarkable woman. But Karen grew up in that environment, and Karen's parents were not saved growing up, and my parents were not saved growing up, and they're all wonderful Christians now. My dad's with the Lord, but that's what we grew up in. When I married Karen, Karen thought that she was ugly and God hated her. She was full of self-hate. I've never met a person with lower self-esteem than Karen. I had all my own issues, but I covered it up by trying to be macho and acting like I didn't have any problems, and I was a totally messed up guy. And so when Karen and I got married, we almost divorced, and part of our issue of divorcing was just we were devastated. We were like two porcupines trying to love each other. It was kind of a painful deal. So we had so much so many issues in our lives that every time we got close to each other, we just hurt each other. And then we would back away and, try to heal up and then get back together. And it just kept happening over and over and over. And so this issue, Karen and I wake up today and we're healed. By God's grace, we're healed. 10 standards to test your level of emotional health. Now listen to me. Emotional health gives us the ability to relate to God and others properly. That's emotional health. When you're emotionally healthy, you can relate to other people properly. When you're not emotionally healthy, you just can't relate properly. There are just things you cannot do when you're emotionally unhealthy. So listen, and all emotional health is registered by abilities. When you have emotional health, you have the ability to do certain things. When you do not have emotional health, you don't have those abilities, okay? So let me just read through 10, and what we do is we score this on a level from 0 to 10. 0 means I don't have that ability at all. 10 means I'm perfect in that area, and most of us would score somewhere in between. Number one way that we measure our emotional health, the ability to openly express both physical and verbal affection to the satisfaction of your spouse. I couldn't give Karen physical affection. My father never touched me from the time I was 3 years old to the time I was 38 years old at my grandmother's funeral. Our family was not affectionate. I have 2 older brothers, Damien and Lucifer. And they beat me up every day. And when Karen and I got married, I could be sexual, but I couldn't hug her. I couldn't hold her hand without pinching around on it and stuff. I just couldn't be affectionate, verbally or physically. Number 2, way that we measure, the ability to empathize with others and focus on the needs and desires of others, especially your spouse. The ability to empathy. Listen, empathizing means I put myself in your shoes. Healthy people think about other people. Unhealthy people at the hospital aren't writing get well cards. When you're in the hospital, you're thinking about getting well. And so when you're not well emotionally, you think about yourself all the time. You don't think about other people. But when you're well, you empathize. You look at other people and say, I wonder how they're feeling. I wonder how my behavior is affecting this person. Okay, number 2. Number 3, the ability to honestly and openly communicate in a gracious manner. When I'm emotionally healthy, it just means I can talk about my feelings. And my dad, God bless him, I would say to my dad, Daddy, tell me about your father. And he would just start crying. He couldn't say one word. My dad would just start crying. If you asked him any question that involved an emotion from his past, he would just start crying. Number 4, the ability to complain and confront your spouse and others in a timely and gracious manner. In other words, to confront. I have the ability to walk up to you and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, and I love you, but, this and this and this. Not being healthy emotionally means I either don't communicate or I fly off the handle or I'm passive aggressive or something like that. Okay. Number 5, the ability to receive complaints, correction, and input in a gracious manner without being defensive or hostile. So someone comes and they confront me, and so what it means is that I can receive someone's complaint toward me and not be defensive or hostile toward that. When you're emotionally unhealthy, you can't. Number 6, the ability to take responsibility for your behavior and say you are sorry with sincerity and grace in a timely manner. It means I did something wrong. It's easy for me to say I'm sorry when I've done something wrong. I didn't say I was sorry for the first 6 years of our relationship. For 3 years of dating and 3 years of marriage, I never one time acknowledged I'd done anything wrong. And when anything happened in our relationship, I became a prosecuting attorney, and my job was to convince Karen that she was the problem. Okay. And that led us to the brink of divorce. And that was how emotionally unhealthy I was. You see, I was macho. I couldn't be wrong. And that's one of the ways you know you're unhealthy. Number 7, the ability to serve and give to others who are not reciprocating, especially your spouse. When you're emotionally healthy, it means that I can give to you. I mean, God's filled my cup, and I've got some to spare, so I can give to you even if you're not giving back. Emotionally unhealthy people, it's tit for tat. I can't do anything for you that you're not doing for me. Number 8, the ability to process anger, offenses, and disappointments in a timely and gracious manner. Bad things happen, and I get angry, I get disappointed, and it just means I can process it. We have an imperfect world, we're imperfect people, so we're going to have imperfect emotions, but I can work through it. I get angry, I can work through it. I get disappointed, I can work through it. Emotionally unhealthy people, they stew on things, and things stick. Rather than processing it and getting it out, it sticks on the inside of me. Number 9, the ability to be vulnerable and reveal weakness without fear or shame. And that's one of the reasons that I couldn't pray with Karen, is because I feared vulnerability. And again, that was one of the reasons I was so emotionally unhealthy. The ability to be vulnerable and reveal weakness without fear or shame. Number 10, the ability to be joyful and faith-filled in the midst of difficulty and to see the good in things and people. The ability to be joyful and faith-filled in the midst of difficulty, to have a good attitude in the midst of things, knowing, hey, we're going to get through this. God's a big God, so on and so forth, rather than becoming fatalistic, cynical, depressed, all those kinds of things. So all the first, those 10 there, I couldn't do any of those when Karen and I got married. I mean, on all of those, I would register somewhere between a 0 and a 3 or 4. And so when you're emotionally healthy, you just have certain abilities that you don't when you don't. Okay, so some of you can relate to coming from hurt, coming from a background of difficulty. And so when I'm talking about this, you on some of these, you would have given yourself maybe a very low score. Okay, that directly affects your spouse. Anywhere where you scored low or did not score well, it directly affects your marriage and your spouse. And your marriage cannot grow beyond that. Here's the good news. If you scored 0 on one of these, a month from now, you could score a 6 or 7. Let me tell you why. Because the Holy Spirit is very powerful. And God is the only one who can go on the inside of us and repair something that's damaged. He's the only one. God lives on the inside of us. He knows exactly what's wrong. And when we give Him permission to fix us, when we understand that something's broken and we give Him permission to fix something, He does. Well, this program today, we're talking about inner healing, and there are a lot of issues that we deal with related to inner healing, but we have some questions from our viewers. And a lot of these questions really have to do with the need for some inner healing. So, Karen, we have.
My husband lost his job recently, and he seems to be taking it especially hard. He says he's fine, but then he lashes out at me and the kids. What can I do?
Well, first of all, men attach a lot more of their ego to their job than women do, because honor is the number one need that a man has, or respect. And so when a man loses his job, it can really deal a blow to him. But especially if there's already a wound there. There could be a wound of failure or financial failure, or maybe this is not the first job that he's lost. Maybe he doesn't feel like he's as significant as he ought to be. And so he's lashing out at anger, but it's really hurt. The issue there is not that he's mad at her or mad at the kids. He could feel that God is against him. When I do the inner healing app that we're talking about, the 21-day journey, one of the first things I talk about is our concept of God. Sometimes when life's events begin to go in a wrong way, we may think that God's against us. And that makes us angry. Is the feeling that I'm doing my best down here, why aren't you helping me out? And sometimes, I've been angry at God before. At times that I just felt like, you're not doing your job. You're not looking out for me. Well, of course He was. But it was just my concept of God at that time. So he could have concept of God issues. He could have hurts from his past. But this woman is asking the question of what she can do. Number one is pray. Is pray that God would heal your husband's heart, that would help him to find the truth. The second is praise your husband. Just let him know how much you appreciate what a hard worker he is, how you can help or whatever, but his anger is misplaced.
Well, you might need to talk to somebody else too. Sometimes it's good to talk to other people who've been through what you've been through.
Right.
And just get support from other men that know exactly how you're feeling.
Absolutely.
And just being able to vent with someone else and to express how they're feeling. Because it may be that his wife is being supportive, but in his mind she's thinking, you just don't understand. Right. Even though she's trying her best. And so maybe he should find someone else to talk to too.
I think that'd be great. Either he go talk to somebody or they go talk to somebody. But just, letting him stew like this into, to spew on her and the kids, that's not a healthy situation. No. Okay, I've got a question from a viewer, Karen, for you. My wife and her siblings got in a fight, and now she refuses to talk to anyone in her family. In fact, she's gone to the extreme of talking bad about them. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, because, there's no one that probably hasn't had issues with another person in their family, and they brought it into the marriage. So, in my personal just life, I would say, that she really does need to be careful about her heart, because it does affect the relationship with her husband.
Right.
And so, I would, just encourage her. One of the things that you used to do with me when I had issues like this is you would just let me talk. You know, I said, I just need someone to talk to, just to vent. But you would never let me stay mad. You would never let me, you know, be unforgiving. And even if I was angry, you didn't let me stay that way. And same with, I did with you.
Yeah.
You know, we would be a balance and a check with each other. And, you know, maybe he just needs to communicate that he can only imagine how hard it is. And maybe even say, I agree with why you feel this way. But we can't stay there. We can't let what's happened in your family affect us or you, because it's just not healthy. Yeah. You know, and anger, like you're always saying, just grows and grows and grows. And before you know it, it becomes resentment, bitterness, unforgiveness. And then it's the biggest mess.
It consumes the whole family.
It does.
Well, let's talk about motive for just a minute. Now, in all honesty, Karen, there are family members that we don't relate to in our family. Again, we have a big family, but I'm saying there are some people that just frankly we learned years ago, it's just too painful to be around them. But when your motive is bitterness, when it's not protection, it's not, you know, we've tried this and it just doesn't work. But when you're bitter.
Well, they're probably judgmental too.
Yeah.
She's probably judged.
And he says that she's talking bad. See, if forgiveness means I'm giving God's the judge, I'm not the judge. And I'm not going to talk bad about him. I'm not going to seek revenge. I'm not going to try to get vengeance and things like that. So when I have forgiven a person, I'm not talking bad about them. Great. Sometimes you have to withdraw from certain relationships to protect yourself and protect your family. But if you're doing it the right way, there won't be the bad mouthing, there won't be the bitterness, because that's not just hurting somebody else, it's hurting you. Now we have more program coming up, so stay tuned. Well, this program today is on inner healing. And Karen, we're talking about the inner healing journey. And you were really the first one of us that the Lord began to heal, and then that affected our marriage in a tremendous way.
Well, I was thinking about how I wish we'd had this, you know, back when we were this age, at age we got married, because it would have been so helpful to, you know, have some tools to deal with, you know, the different things that were troubling us that we just didn't know how to deal with.
Well, we were 19 years old, and we had both been through things before that were devastating. I mean, we both had a lot of wounds and baggage that we brought into the relationship. And we knew the Lord. I got saved a week before we got married, but we had just began to, you know, have a relationship with the Lord. And you were the one that every day you would wake up and read the Bible, and the Lord began to heal you. You hated yourself. You thought you were ugly. You thought you were fat. You thought that God hated you. I mean, you had very low self-esteem, and I had all my issues. But you can't be healthier in your marriage than you are emotionally.
I agree.
That you grow to your level of emotional health, then you stop growing. And so this program, we want to encourage you that to not take a snapshot of where you are right now and just to think, well, this is just the way I am. Because God heals us. I mean, thank God that there's a place on the inside of us that a doctor can't go and that a person can't go, and only God can go into that place. And we're talking about how to go through a process of inner healing and let the Lord heal you, because He heals your marriage as you get healed.
And be open to the fact that even if you don't think you're not, you know, because you never know how unhealthy you are till you get healed. And when you get healed, you realize, oh my gosh, I really was a mess. Well, and don't look at your spouse and think, well, they're the ones unhealthy. I can guarantee you both are unhealthy. Yeah,
and we marry to our level of emotional health, you know, and so when we got married, I was, you know, very dominant and had very, I had issues and insecurities, but I masked it with being macho. And you were beaten down and all that. Well, we matched in a wrong way. And so, and this doesn't work. When you have a very dominant, overbearing person that marries a very passive person, it doesn't work. You resent the person that dominates you, and you then resent this person because they're checked out and they're not honest. And so, when you get healed, it'll give you a different set of glasses to see life through. For example, right now, when we got married, you thought everybody hated you. You thought God hated you. You thought all these things. Well, you don't think that today.
No.
You don't see life through those glasses. And I changed too. But it changes the way you see people. It changes the way you see God. It changes the way you enter into marriage and relationships. And so, you know, thank God that Jesus died to forgive us of our sins, but also Jesus died that by His stripes we're healed. And that's not just healing of an outer sickness, It's healing of the things on the inside of us that only God can heal.
Well, nobody wants to be defined by what's happened to them in their past that was not good.
That's right.
You know, I didn't want to be defined by, how I thought people felt about me or how I felt about myself. You know, I hated that. I was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I begged God to change me because you just feel so enclosed in this trap of it's bondage. Just like that's why Jesus said He came to set the captives free, because you are captive to whatever it is that's, making you unhealthy from your past. And I mean, once you're free, it's like, oh my gosh, it's the biggest blessing.
Well, I want you to know, Karen and I both want you to know that we almost didn't make it. We were the walking wounded. Mm-hmm. We were a mess. We almost divorced. And if God can do what He's done in our lives, He can do it in anybody's life. And we just want to encourage you to work on yourself, to focus on yourself. When you change, your marriage changes.